This conference is brought to you by CodeStack, React and React Native development experts.
I'm Satyajit Sahoo and I work at CodeStack, and I'm the maintainer of React Navigation. Today I'm excited to share React Navigation 6 with all of you. So navigation in React Native is one of the most important parts of React Native. It's one of the first things that users experience in the app, and that's why it's important to provide a smooth and native feeling to the user while keeping things match our brand. Today we have React Navigation, which is one of the most popular navigation libraries. But it wasn't always like that. In fact, there have been many attempts at solving this problem. There have been a lot of libraries with a lot of different APIs and varying approaches. I still remember when I first tried building something in React Native, one of the first things I was looking for was to replicate that native feel. It was one of the first things that came to my mind. So I wasn't like searching for navigation libraries per se, but that's what I meant. Like that's the feeling I wanted to capture. So interestingly, React Native already included a navigation library when it first launched, unlike right now. So initially there was Navigator iOS. It was long before React Native added Android support, and it was iOS only. So it was a fully native component, which was only for iOS, and it replicated iOS navigation controller. It had a very small set of customization options. You could only change the header color and the font family, etc. But since it was native, it was pretty smooth. This component is no longer in React Native core, but luckily this was just the beginning. So when React Native launched on Android, we needed a new navigation library since Navigator iOS did not work on Android. So Navigator was born. Navigator was fully JavaScript written and did not use any native APIs. And this was a little bit more customizable than Navigator iOS since you could change a lot of stuff. But there was one major drawback with it. It did not use the animated API. So the problem is when animated added support for native driver, you could not use a native driver because it used to call request animation frame to drive its animations without using the animated API. So the migration wasn't straightforward. So we needed something new, and we had Navigation Experimental. It was built by Eric Vicente from Facebook, and it was part of React Native Core. It was a set of navigation-related components which are now built with the animated API. It was very low level, which allowed users to build own behaviors on top of it, like our own navigation library on top of this. It was very customizable, but wasn't easy to get started. I remember when I was using this API in one of my apps, I had a lot of custom code to like manage the navigation, because this library only manages the animation, not the logic. So not long after, a new navigation library from Wix was born called React Native Navigation. This was fully native navigation library, worked on Android and iOS, is still maintained and currently at version 4, and one of the most popular navigation libraries after React Navigation. It introduced the concept of registering screen as separate groups. So each screen acts like its own independent app. So this data is still accessible from JavaScript, and you can use JavaScript to do everything, but it still used some native APIs and some things were not possible. So next we got X Navigation. This was a kind of continuation of Navigation Experimental by Expo, and mainly built by Brent Watney and Adam Miskiewicz. Similar to Navigation Experimental, it used animated API for animations and implemented in pure JavaScript. This was also one of the first navigation libraries which supported multiple patterns such as tabs, drawer, etc. And it was very customizable and had a lot of features. But as all good things should do, like this also came to an end. It wasn't forever. So yeah, the next big navigation library was Airbnb's native navigation. So this was built around brownfield apps, and it was to make integration with brownfield apps easier, which Airbnb did a lot. So it was very similar to React Native navigation by Wix, and we had to register the screens upfront, like we do in Wix. So sadly now it's no longer maintained since Airbnb is no longer working with React Native, but yeah, it's now abandoned like a lot of navigation libraries in React Native. So all of these libraries have their pros and cons. I also didn't mention many libraries because they're not very popular, and probably I cannot like mention all of the libraries that exist in this presentation. But yeah, but now it is time to come up with something from the community, something that people who actively work with React Native maintain. So the community, Facebook, and Expo came together and built a new navigation library called React Navigation. So it was very customizable, addressed many use cases. It was written in JavaScript only, like X navigation, like Navigator. But the main limitation of this library was a static navigation API, which prevented many use cases. It went through many major releases. So current version is React Navigation 4, but the core API of defining the screens statically is still the same. So even if all of these things changed, the basic API stayed the same. So React Navigation 4 is still used in a huge number of apps. So we are not going to deprecate it anytime soon because it will be like terrible to migrate all of them to new React Navigation 5, which is completely different API. So yeah, we are still merging pull requests for React Navigation 4, and it's while we are not adding any new features, it's still actively maintained. So yeah, mentioning React Navigation 5, after React Navigation 4, the next thing we had was React Navigation 5. Even though it's still React Navigation, I thought like I should mention it here because it had a reimagination of the core API. So I think it's a like big milestone in the landscape of navigation. So one of the biggest changes was the dynamic API. Instead of the old static API that React Navigation 4 used, React Navigation 5 had a new API which was fully component based, and it was dynamic, that you can change anytime depending on state or props. The core had to like go through a rewrite to be able to support this, and it was a like major undertaking for us. The migration for React Navigation 4 to 5 isn't straightforward because the whole API for the navigation changed. While some APIs remained, a lot of APIs are like totally different. But I guess it was worth it considering how many pain points it solved, like how many new use cases it enabled, and people tend to find it like a lot more intuitive than the previous API. So now there is another major version. We introduced React Navigation 5 here on React Europe 2 years ago. Now it is time for React Navigation 6. Largely, React Navigation 6 maintains the same core API as React Navigation 5. And you can think of it as like further polishing of the API and the code base of what was in React Navigation 5. When working on React Navigation 6, there are a few things we wanted to focus on. The first thing was flexibility. Many of the navigators accept some customization as props, which means we cannot customize them based on the currently active screen. So for example, here is a video I have where we have a bottom tab and we have several tabs. We have contacts, we have album. Say I switch to the album tab and you can see that the whole styling of the tab changed. Now we have a translucent and dark background tab bar, and the highlight color of the tab changed to white instead of blue. So previously this was not possible at all because all of the options we wanted to specify were specified at navigator's level. So at navigator level, you can have like only one set of props. So we cannot change the background color when you switch to album screen. So to make this possible, we had to make all of these options customizable per screen. So this is how we did it. We had tab bar options, property prop on navigator before, and instead of using tab bar options, now they are part of screens options. So now you can pass all of these things inside screen options, but you can also specify them in the options prop of the screen. So screen options is the default for all of the screens in navigator, and options will be specific to the screen where you're using it. So with this, you'll be able to have a set of default for the whole navigator, and you can override those defaults per screen. So we did the same thing for bottom tabs, material top tabs, and drawer. So all of them, instead of having tab bar options or drawer content options, you can specify all of these options in screen options. It will also be simpler for users to understand because you don't get confused about what is tab bar options and what is screen options. So to make it more flexible, we also introduced a new library called React Navigation Elements. So React Navigation Elements is a set of components and utilities that we use in React Navigation, but they're like exported for use in any app or any library. If you're building custom navigator, you can use these, or you can use this inside your app. So we have currently header back button, header title, platform traceable, and some other components, and we'll be adding more soon. And if you have ideas on what to add, then feel free. This is not a like full-fledged component library. These are only components which are useful for navigation and integrations with navigators. So next thing is we wanted to simplify some of the API and reduce the manual work. React Navigation supports a lot of customization, and it's possible to achieve many advanced things with it. And you can do a lot of things, but you have to tweak things a bit. You have to play around with it a bit because sometimes things may not be obvious. But what we wanted to do is like we wanted to simplify some common tasks, because yeah, if you want very advanced niche tasks, it makes sense that you will have to like figure out things your own. But for common tasks, if we just make it one line, it's much better for everybody. So yeah, one example of this was model presentation style. We introduced this in React Navigation 5 and also in React Navigation 4 with React Navigation Stack version 2. So to use it, you had to specify the animation with the transition preset, and you had to specify card overlay enable to true. You had to specify header status bar height. So you had to specify all of these things manually. Now with React Navigation 6, all you have to do is like specify the transition, and everything else will be set automatically. So you can still customize everything if you want to, but the common case, which is the native model presentation styles from iOS, you just need one line. So this is not all. Another common example was when you set a custom header on Stack Navigator, you have to also set header mode to screen, or if you don't do that, you have to handle the animation manually. So while it's nice to be able to handle the animation manually, a lot of people got confused that they had to do that. They did not read the documentation even if it was mentioned, and we wanted to reduce this confusion. And so in React Native 5, we could not do this automatically because the problem is we had this option for the header, but we also had header mode, which is a prop on Navigator, and these props cannot be changed based on screen. So in React Navigation 6, we moved header mode to screen options. And since we did that, we are able to automatically set it when you specify a custom header. So now it will default to screen when you have a custom header. You can always change it to float and if you need it, but the default will be screen when you're using a custom header. Another small thing is when you had use header height, it would return 0 if you had a hidden header. So in React Native 6, if you have it inside a nested stack and the parent stack has a header shown and the nested stack has a header shown false, now use header height will return the height of the parent header, which is more useful. So another thing is transparent model. For transparent models, you also need a couple of options. Now we have only one option, presentation transparent model, and that's all you need for transparent models. Of course, you can also customize it more. There are examples in the documentation, but the simplest case requires one line. Similarly, we added a new feature to specify a background for bottom tabs. For example, you can specify a blur view, or you can specify a gradient or like an image or whatever you want without having to use the custom tab bar or wrapping the default tab bar. So yeah, we wanted to make these things simpler for users, and React Navigation 6 includes a lot of these quality of life improvements. So another API we looked at is in a lot of apps, people wanted to navigate from Redux middleware or like things which are not in components. And to do that, they had to add a ref to the navigation container. But when you do that, you have to manage some things manually. For example, you have to like make two refs. You have to check if the navigation ref was assigned, and you also have to add a ready ref to check if navigation was ready to be able to dispatch actions. Now we have like a create navigation container ref helper and also a use navigation container ref hook, and it has all of these set up automatically. So all you need is like just check is ready on this ref, and then you call navigate on this ref, so which is much simpler than before. So another thing we often noticed that people nest their navigators a lot, sometimes due to necessity and sometimes because of organization. We always recommend keeping nesting to the minimum when possible because of a couple of reasons. When you nest more, it becomes harder to do some things. For example, you have like TypeScript. There is a lot of complicated code when there are nested navigators, and when you are navigating, you have to like write screen, then pass params where you specify the name of the child screen. So it also becomes more complicated as you nest more and more. A flat navigation tree is much simpler to use if you have the same amount of screens. So another reason is performance. When you nest more, the performance decreases because updating deep navigation trees is slow, and also nesting a lot of views is not good for memory users. In React Native, there are layout views which are automatically optimized out, but if you're nesting navigators unnecessarily, it's gonna increase the view count. So there is not a lot we can do. So we wanted to minimize these necessities by providing alternatives. So one of the alternatives, one of the use cases was for nesting navigators is modal and regular screens. So earlier you had to have a modal screen at the root, and then as a child you have to have a regular stack. So you put all of the modal screens inside this modal stack and all of the regular screens inside of this regular stack. It was not possible to mix modal screens and regular screens. So you had to have two stack navigators. So we did some work to make it possible so that you can use a single stack navigator with two types of screens. So now you can have one stack navigator, and wherever you want modal, you just pass presentation modal in the options, and that screen will be treated as a modal. So in case of here, you don't need to nest anything. It's all possible in one navigator, but there is still the case of organization. Maybe you like to keep all the modals in one group. Yeah. So what we did is we introduced a new API to group things. Normally you can use React fragments for this, but fragments are a couple of things, issues. I mean, they're not issues, but they're more readability thing, because it's not obvious why you are using a fragment. Like maybe you read the code and like there is a fragment, why is there? Maybe if you add a comment, it gets clearer, but still. Another problem is fragments do not pass options to their screens. Like you cannot specify options like you can on a navigator. So if you have two navigators, say for all of the models, you want like a blue header or something like that. So you cannot do that when you're just grouping the fragments. So we introduced a new API called group. And with group, you can just like group things inside this group component. And you can also pass common options in screen options to this group, like you can do on a navigator. And you can even nest groups inside groups. So yeah, you can go crazy with like how much organization you want. Groups don't actually render anything like fragments. They are just used for configuration. So it's not going to affect performance like nested navigators do. So here you can see that we have two groups. We have one group for regular screens and one group for modal screens. So another common reason for nesting was headers. Previously, when we wanted to show a header in a tab, bottom tabs, or drawer, we had to nest a stack navigator inside, because they did not render a header by default. So what we do now is we render a header by default in drawer or bottom tabs, and then you don't need to nest anything because it's already there. And for drawer, we automatically add a button to open the drawer. For tabs, we don't add any button, but in both drawer and tabs, the header will represent the name of the current screen by default, so you don't have to handle that manually. So I think as a whole, it simplifies things. You can of course hide this header if you want, but yeah, it's there if you want it. So next thing is native navigation. Historically, React navigation and a lot of precursors like X navigation, navigation experimental have been JavaScript only, with animations and gestures, everything written in JavaScript. It works for a lot of apps, but apps with heavy screens can suffer. So we also wanted to address this concern. So we wanted to like promote use of native navigation primitives. So with React Navigation 5, we introduced the native stack package. This native stack package from React Native Screens, and we also had the view pager backend for material top tabs. And this backend used view pager 2 and UI page view controller. So yeah, we wanted to promote use of UI navigation controller for stack on iOS and fragment on Android, and view pager 2 on Android for the material top tabs, and UI page view controller for iOS for material top tabs. So in React Navigation 5, these were optional, and in React Navision 6, now we promote use of native stack by default. If you go to reactnavision.org and you go through the getting started guide, by default, you will set up native stack. The JavaScript stack is still there and still maintained, but for new apps, we'll have the native stack by default. So you will have better performance unless you need more customization. Then you can always go for the JavaScript-based stack navigation. So I wanted to thank React Native Screens from Software Mansion, made by Christoph Magera, Wojtek, and Kasper. And native stack is possible only because of React Native Screens. Without their work, it wouldn't be possible. So yeah, I want to thank them. And similarly, I also want to thank Piotr, Mateusz, Michał, and Alpha0010 for React Native Pager View. It would be possible to have a native backend for natural top tabs without their work. So yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for making React Native better. So next thing we wanted to focus on was better types. React Navision 5 had much better types than React Navision 4, but some things that as use navigation were still untyped by default. You could navigate to any random string and it won't give you a type error. So we wanted to change that and make them more type safe. So now in React Navision 6, you do not need to annotate use navigation to get auto-completion and type checking. It is typed by default, but it's not automatic because we cannot know all of the screens in your app automatically. You still need to change one thing, but if you already have typing for your React navigation screens, it's just very few changes to make this work. So it is possible by defining a type for the root navigation, the navigator at the root, and it works by using a feature in TypeScript called declaration merging. You can find more about this feature and how to use that in our TypeScript related docs. So next thing we wanted to improve as developer tools. Now we have a flipper plugin for React Navigation. This is only working in React Navision 6, but this plugin includes similar functionality to what's currently available in the Redux DevTools extension that we have. This Redux DevTools extension works with both React Navision 5 and React Navision 6, but the problem with Redux DevTools extension is that it is not our UI. We're just using the Redux DevTools, so we cannot build anything we want. So with this Flipper plugin, since it's fully custom built, we can add any new features we want. We can here you can see there is a linking tab where it shows you the deep link structure. Another advantage of this Flipper plugin is it doesn't need Chrome debugger. So when you are using Chrome debugger, some things may not work properly. So this Flipper plugin gives you a better idea of how things are working instead of this Chrome debugger, which may break things. Unfortunately, this Flipper plugin doesn't work in Expo, but it works in other React Native apps. So yeah, with every major releases, there's still question about upgrades because everyone dreads upgrades. While React Navigation 6 isn't a huge change over React Navigation 5, it's much smaller change than React Navigation 4 to React Navigation 5. And there are still a lot of breaking changes. So there are a few things we can do when updating to make things easier. So first of all of these changes are listed in our upgrade guide. We have some mandatory breaking changes which you will have to do if you're upgrading. We also have some deprecation warnings. You don't have to change them immediately. These things will continue working until next major release, but they'll show you deprecation warnings, which you can ignore with yellow box API. So another thing you can do to simplify this migration is you can mix versions from 5x and 6x. So generally, it's not something you do if you're starting a new application, but for upgrading, it's perfectly reasonable and it will work, but there are some caveats. Please refer to the upgrade guide for the list of caveats if you're mixing these two packages. And as long as you keep these things in the mind, you should be able to mix those versions. So yeah, go to our upgrade guide and read more about it. We have a full list of breaking changes, full list of deprecations, and we also have the list of caveats when you're mixing 5x and 6x packages. So just wanted to mention a few more things before I sign off. We enabled GitHub Discussions on our repo. So feel free to go there and talk with other community members. It's entirely driven by community. So yeah, please participate in these discussions, answer people, or ask questions, or just share things you have done with React Navigation. So if you want to help, you can help with code obviously, but there are a lot more things you can do to help. So you can improve our documentation, you can answer questions on Stack Overflow or GitHub Discussions. You can trial issues, check which issues are valid, which are not, check the repo they have posted, or if they haven't, you can ask for something or try to make a repo yourself, or review pull requests. We have a very small development team, so any help will help us a lot, and it will be very beneficial to everyone. Another thing I wanted to ask is we enable sponsorships for React Navigation, and if React Navigation is valuable to you, if it brings value to your company, consider sponsoring us. We appreciate any financial contributions and sponsorships. So you can go here, github.com/sponsors/React Navigation, and we have a lot of different tiers, and you can sponsor whatever is comfortable for you. Okay, so that's all for now, and I thank you a lot. Hope you have a nice day or nice evening, and hope you enjoy React Navigation.